Um, Marty,
Yes.
look in the camera.
I have to look at the camera the whole
Yeah.
time?
Uh,
Why don't you move your chair over
I
so we
will.
can...
I will. Um, just tell me first your name and when you were born, the year you were born, where you were born, and just tell me a little bit of biographical information about yourself.
My name is Martin Lazanoff. I was born in Philadelphia on March 21st, 1936. And I was born in the early hours of the morning. I guess I should speak louder for this.
That's okay. You're doing great.
Thank you.
Okay. Why don't you just talk about your family, your sisters, and just your family unit.
I have very, very little recollection of the family life early on. I think the earliest memories I have are about somewhere between the ages of 4 and 6 years old. There was my mother, my father, and my two sisters, older sisters, Lillian and Frida. Lillian, who is 12 years older than I am, I have no recollection of before age, I don't even remember. I think my first recollection of Lillian was when she won the Miss Philadelphia contest, and she was 17 or 18 at the time. I do have some early memories of my father and my mother, and my sister Frida. Shall I go on with just
No, just stop there.
two
Let's just do a
accomplishments?
test. Let's talk about your father. Can you tell me his name?
My father's name is Nathan Lazanoff. As I found out just recently, when my mother died and we were researching some of the official records, the name originally was, I think, Lazanovsky, and shortened when it came to this country. I really didn't appreciate my father until much later. He really led a remarkable life, and now he's someone I admire a great deal. He left Russia when he was 16 as a stowaway on a ship, on a freighter.
Do you know the name of the town he was from?
No, I don't know what part of Russia. I keep thinking of Minsk, Pinsk, and I don't know, probably Western Russia.
Was it a large city or was it a small town?
I don't really remember. I would say that it was probably a smallish city rather than a large one. And that was subject to the pogroms. I remember mention of that in the family. Conditions must have been such that my father, who was one of a large family, wanted to get out. And he was discovered as a stowaway in a ship and put to work, and the ship ended up in Argentina. So my father lived and worked in Argentina for 2 years before coming to the United States. He managed to arrive in the United States just on the eve of the U.S.'s entry into World War I. So he was promptly, I don't know how it worked back then, but apparently he didn't have to be a citizen to be in the armed forces, but he arrived on the shores of the U.S. in New York, I believe, and was promptly drafted into the Army.
What year was that?
Well, that was 1917. And I don't know if he went back overseas again. That would have been ironic for him to travel all those miles and years to get to this country and then be shipped back to Europe. But I don't know if that actually happened. And well, he came to this country. I suppose he could speak Spanish by this time, but I don't know that he spoke English. And it just amazes me the resources, the personal resources that it takes to come to a strange land as a youngster with not speaking the language and to make your way. And I'm realizing that that's what my father did. He the earliest memories I have of him at this point were when 6 years old and thereafter. And he was a manual, a skilled worker, a manual worker, and he was involved, when I remember, in the sheet metal industry. He was always worked. He wasn't around much because he worked all the time. When he would come home, somehow he'd go to sleep on the living room sofa. And one indelible memory was with him sleeping, lying on his back on the living room sofa, stretched out with our cat sitting on his chest. My father snored. And once in a while he would give a loud snort and wake him up, and the cat would leap straight over the air from my father's chest and dart away. It was hilarious to see that. My father started his own business early on. He started it, I think, probably at the outbreak of World War II, when all the large industrial firms who were engaged in fundamental basic manufacturing in this country were then put into the war effort. So it left a vacuum in more domestic areas. My father started a sheet metal fabrication business in the basement of our row house. This was, well, to backtrack for a minute, we did live in South Philadelphia for the first 4 years of my life. I think in a rented house, and then moved to Northeast Philadelphia, uh, again in a rental house. And then when I was 6, my parents bought their own small row house in Northeast Philadelphia. He started this business in the basement of the house, and I don't remember Lillian being there at this time. She was probably married for the first time by then. And but Frida and I would work in the business. We'd be hammering little things for his sheet metal fabrication. He manufactured automobile replacement grills. Since no new cars were being made, the deterioration of the cars that were already on the road through accidents the parts had to be maintained. So he would make those. And he expanded that business into the garage, and then finally got his own place and built up the business from there. And it was just, I look back on that and I just see what a remarkable achievement that was. He built up to a size, small factory operation. When he went out of business many years later, he rented the property and the facilities to one of the major steel companies in the United States, Horace T. Potts Steel. So my father had a sizable operation that he built from nothing. And that just astounds me. My own background is so different. Another thing that I note about my father, and I guess what it takes to survive in the world, is that if somebody owed my father money, he would visit that person's place of business or something with a baseball bat to get his money. Somebody owes me money, I hire a lawyer, I send letters, and it's a whole different way of approaching.
How did you know that he sent someone over with a baseball bat?
Well, I would hear stories. I would go down to his place of business. My mother worked in that business as well. She did all the books, and oh God, what abuse she took. My father was a very bright man, and very interested in knowledge and education, but he was also very, streetwise and rough and ready. And he employed a workforce that he taught. It was basically a laboring workforce that he taught to be skilled in various areas. And he was what appeared to be so abusive to them. I mean, he would curse at these people, yell at them, and scream at them. He had no psychological finesse about, and they loved him. They really they loved him. He paid well. They did work on piecework at that time, but he paid well, and people made a lot of money with my father. But he was terribly abusive. Unfortunately, he was that way with my mother as well, and that wasn't so nice.
Michael mentioned he had siblings in orphanages.
I think my father was one of 7. I think he had 7 brothers and sisters, I suppose. I knew only 2 of them. I guess, who were in this country. I don't know where the rest of them were. There were some shadowy, well, maybe not shadowy, but some vague figures in the background that I really don't recall very well.
What were his siblings' names that you knew?
One sibling's name was Isidore, who was apparently an excellent chess and checker player. I mean, real high caliber. Another one was, I don't know his real name, but his nickname was Marty. So it's probably Matthew. And he lost most of the fingers on one hand through an industrial accident. There's still one brother who's still alive. Dave. Dave Lasanoff spells it differently. Spells it L-A-Z. And he may not be alive now, but he lived in Philadelphia and was most recently, I saw a few years ago, in a nursing home with his wife. I don't know where they are.
Did your father bring them over, or did they come around the same time, or do you know anything?
I don't know. The only other person in the family I know that my father was involved in was, I guess it was my father's my father's niece, who he married in order to bring her over from Russia. So,
Your father married his niece?
was it my father or was it no, I guess it was my grandfather. I'm sorry, not my father. My grandfather married his niece. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm getting it mixed up. That was just a peculiar relation because my mother's cousin then became her stepmother. And no, my father's family, I don't really know.
Do you know if he came from a religious family?
I have no idea. He certainly did not have religion, so.
So there was no observance of Jewish holidays in your house?
No, there was no observance of Jewish holidays. There was certainly a recognition, an identification that we were Jewish, but there was no observance of Jewish holidays. In fact, it was I who brought the Christmas tree to school in elementary school every year for the Christmas holidays. We had a little portable Christmas tree.
So did you have a bar mitzvah?
At age 11, since all my friends were going to Hebrew school to get bar mitzvah, I decided I wanted to do that too, and I did. And I don't think we did not have the family did not have a religious background, but a very, I mean, not only a strong Jewish identity, it was a given. It wasn't as though it was because there was not a religious background that our identification with Judaism, our identification as Jews, was at all diminished. That's not the case. So, but no, there was no religious background. Going to camp, to summer camp, well, of course, getting bar mitzvah, but then going to summer camp where there were Sabbath services every Friday night and Sunday, I really got to be, took in all that ritual and those songs. I mean, it still moves me today when I hear even though they've changed some of the melodies of the old familiar songs, it still moves me.
Was your father, where was he at politically?
My father was liberal. It was a very liberal thing. I guess if you could say anything, well, I don't really know, but he was liberal. I was going to say he's maybe libertarian, but my father was a very liberal thinker.
Was he communist? Sympathizer?
No, I don't believe. I was not aware of my father ever being connected with any kind of organized or formal political environment. He was very much an independent thinker, which was another one of his strengths, another of his strong points. A very strong intellectual inclinations. Was people oriented, loved to talk to people. In later years, when he retired, he'd walk around the neighborhood in the summertime in one of my mother's cut-off girdles, which held his belly in, pushed his chest back up to where it belonged, and just engaged all the neighbors in conversation. Was well known and well loved in the neighborhood. Those are things that I really didn't. I began to appreciate later, but I didn't realize some of the really remarkable qualities of my father early on. I really saw most of what would be considered, I guess, dysfunctional in a dysfunctional family.
He was concerned with his looks?
He was proud of his looks. I wouldn't say he was concerned in a vain sense, but he was proud of his health, his youthful condition, his youthful-looking body, the tone of it, and that kind of thing. It was not vain at all.
So he was in good physical condition?
Yes, he was a good physician. He worked hard all his life. Retired early. He went out of the sheet metal fabrication business with the idea of investing in another business. But being so conservative financially, he never did. And I guess, in a sense, luckily, because it enabled my mother to continue to live for, what was it, maybe 30, 35 years after he died.
How old was your father when he died?
My father was 79 when he died.
How did he die?
He had a stroke, and he was about a 2-month period. He had a stroke, and then came out of the hospital, went back in, and finally died of uremic poisoning, I guess, because his kidneys went, and I guess his lungs filled up with water too.
What kind of relationship did you and your sister, I know you don't remember my mother's relationship, have with your father?
I, very distant. I don't know about Frida, but I imagine it was more or less the same. But my relation was very, it was a distance. My father was not there. He was not, or no one in my family was actually very demonstrative physically, affectionately. And he was, did not participate in he did not take, my mother raised the family. My father worked and provided. And he spent a lot of time and effort doing that. So he wasn't there a lot. When he was, it was because of his personality. He was many times was unpleasant. So there was an element of fear and intimidation in around him. There were arguments between my mother and my father that were just terrifying. I would hide under the bed. I'd be crawl in a corner somewhere. So there wasn't a relationship, so to speak. I did recognize years later that he did, in his way, try to engage me. When I was very young, we went on a car trip, kind of for summer, for several weeks, and just the two of us. I was a youngster. We were going up into the Poconos, the Catskills, to do fishing and all kinds of stuff. What you would think of as ideal for bonding, father and son bonding. I got in the car and driving through all this wonderful country, and I was reading comic books, and I could just imagine now, because I could see myself in with the position reversed with relation to younger kids now, and they having no interest in what I wanted to do for them and with them. And so it must have hurt him to be going on a trip, and I'm reading comic books in the car, but I had nothing to say to him, and I guess he to me. We, but it was my first. He did take me on my first bowling in this game, and my first bowl I ever rolled was a strike. So I remember little things like that. We did do fishing, and he would, in his way, want to teach me, show me, because he was a masterful mechanic in all different ways. He could repair anything. And he would have me be with him while he did stuff, but it was torture for me. His way of teaching me was to order me to stand there and watch him. So I'd stand there and watch him, hating every minute of it. And so none of that ever did rub off. In fact, I mean, I just went in an entirely different direction.
In what way did you go in an entirely different direction?
Well, it's I say that I can repair anything, as my father can. I can repair anything. I can do it with one finger by dialing the phone. And he does it all himself. I mean, I really didn't do anything mechanical. I would always call somebody to repair things. I recall on one of our driving trips up here to visit, you may not even have been born yet, but to visit Lillian and Marvin and the family, our car stopped. The car got stuck. It stopped. My father got out, looked under the hood, took a look around, saw what was wrong, went into the trunk, got a clothes hanger, a wire hanger, which we used at the time, broke it off, did some little thing, went under the hood, did something with the hanger under the hood and fixed it. And we drove on our way and then drove back, and they had it repaired finally when we got home. But I mean, that's the kind of, I would still be sitting out there on the road, waiting for someone to come to rescue me. Or, or differently, I'd just get on the phone, call a tow truck and pay, a fortune to have it done for me and lose the trip and so on. So, my father loved to engage in discussions, all kinds of, mainly political discussions, also philosophical discussions. He was widely read and was interested in those kinds of things. And even though I'm greatly influenced by his thinking, his liberal thinking, I would always seem to take an opposite side of his point of view early on. And then later, when he got a little older and his, I guess his resolve, his strength was weakened, or maybe he just realized, as you do later in life, his conflict is not what it's all about. His his strength in that area waned somewhat, and the tables were turned, and I became relentless in arguing my case, and he was kind of backing off. I do not I regret that particular period. This is when he was older.
What's your favorite memory of your father? Anything in particular?
I don't have any endearing favorite memories. I have memories of things where I recognize that he was trying to engage me, even though I was not receptive. When he was looking for businesses, he would take me along to look at him. He kind of evaluate what he was doing. I would learn a little bit from that. He looked at apartment buildings, he looked at bowling alleys, looked at all kinds of different things, and he would go through the evaluation. I would go along many times. And so I learned something from that, but didn't realize that, what he was doing, trying to get me involved with him, and then maybe teaching me something. I think that if there's anything endearing at all, it's that picture of him lying on the sofa every night and giving that snort of a snore and terrifying the cat. But the cat would, next night, the cat would be back on his chest, and we'd go through the same routine again.
Can you describe him physically?
He was not tall. He was I would say about 5'5". And remember that he was 43 when I was born. So it's, my memory of him as I was growing older, he was already getting a little older. Is 5'5", and he was he was slightly built. He wasn't bulky. He was just, I guess, built more or less as I am, but very strong, and I guess wiry.
What was the age difference between him and your mother?
11 years, which is another interesting thing. My father was 11 years older than my mother. My first marriage, I was 11 years older than my first wife.
Hmm.
And since then, I've been closing the gap. I think I was only 10 years older than the second wife, and 10 years seems to be about the gap. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to your mother. Starting with what you can tell me about her basic biographical information, like where her birth date, where she was born, when she came over, the circumstances under which she came over to the States.
She was born also in Russia. She was born on July 31st, 1904. When would that put my father? For 93, yeah, 1893, okay.
What was your father's birthday?
1893.
The date of his birth?
I don't know. Actually, I'm not even sure it's my mother's date. A lot of that stuff was kind of made up at Ellis Island, and but that's the date she used. She came to this country. I don't know with whom. I guess apparently with her family, her parents.
Her maiden name was Shapiro?
Their name was Shapiro. Her mother's name was Frida, and I don't remember her father's name. Both of her parents were dead by the time I was born. And she was 2. Yeah, she was 2 years old. And apparently they came to Philadelphia, settled in South Philadelphia. My mother's mother died when she was 43. Not when my mother was 43, but when her mother was 43 years old. She died.
Do you know how?
No. And my mother always thought that she would die at that age too. The irony is that she lived more than twice that long. And I don't know. Oh yes, I do recall. This is what I'm told, that however my mother and father got together, they did get married when my mother was young. I think my mother was 18 at the time, and within months she came back home because she didn't. I guess she wasn't what she wanted. She didn't feel it was working out. Well, her parents were not very understanding. They sent her right back again, and so she lived and she went back to the marriage and lived the rest of her life. And I don't, much of it unhappy, I think.
Was it an arranged marriage?
No. Oh, not that I know of. I don't think so. They both came to this country independently. I don't think so.
You don't know how they met?
No. No. Yeah, just to jump ahead, I think my mother's, as I see it, my perspective, my point of view, my mother's life really began for herself after my father died. That is within the limits of her own personality and what she could expand and extend herself to. She really kind of came out at that time, and I think enjoyed things more than she ever did. She also was remarkable woman, and once again, I didn't appreciate her at the time. It's only later. She always worked. From the earliest age that I can remember, she worked. I guess I suppose at that time may have been a necessity, but then later it wasn't a necessity anymore. I mean, at some point it wasn't necessary for her to work, but she always did. And much of the time she worked when my father was in business in his business, which must have been awful for her. But she didn't. My father gets credit in the family for having all the brains, but my mother. My mother was smart also, but she never got that recognition. I mean, she handled all the books for my father's business, and she was appreciated far more in the community at large than she ever was in her immediate family. I think all her children had difficulty with her. I think all the children, Frida, Lillian, and I, we were able maybe to relate better to my father, because we could relate on an intellectual basis, and none of us really got along with my mother. And she was so well received in the community at large. People liked her. They sought her company. She had all kinds of boyfriends after my father died. You would hear, you'd meet people that you knew. They'd always comment on what a wonderful woman she was. People she worked with. So she did all kinds of retail work, generally speaking, in department stores, things like that. So she dealt with people. She dealt with the public. She dealt with coworkers, and always did well. She was a woman full of fear, a lot of which I feel she transferred to me, and a lot of her fear was of my father. So, the atmosphere, the environment around the family was not, was not happy.
Did he ever physically abuse her?
No, no.
It was psychological more than that.
Yeah, it was psychological. There was no physical abuse in the family except by my mother. It wasn't anything bad, but it got so my mother would hit you, and it got so I would be doing nothing. I'd be sitting at the dining room table eating. My mother would walk by, and I'd put up my hands to protect myself because I never knew when it was coming. I didn't know what was happening, and there were roots around the dining room table because you couldn't get to her, so you could get on the other side of the dining room table and you go back and forth around the table while she's chasing you around to hit you. Oh God, it was it was a circus.
What was it like? Were your sisters home in those years, or was that when you were the only one?
Lillian, I don't remember Lillian. I don't remember her at all, except when she came back. From her divorce with Michael Sue. But I don't remember.
Were you and Frida fight? Was that what would set her off?
Well, Frida and I fought all the time.
So that would make her. Was that what would make her angry?
Oh, I guess that was part of it. It was something we do. But I think at that time, neither my mother nor my father had the tools, had the personal tools, the psychological tools to deal with. Well, that's not surprising. I don't have them today either. So it's that's how my mother dealt with things. But I'd also have to remember, and when I think of the qualities of my mother, in the marriage, she was, on the one hand, she was, a second place. My father was the dominant personality, dominant figure. But she's the one who, kind of held the family together. My father was never there. He was always out working. And so she held it together. Later, when my father died, let's see, 79, so she was 68, 68. Well, about 30 years, she was on her own. And she thrived on her own. Now, um, I'm just trying to relate that to here's somebody who, and because she had a fear, she had something of a paranoia about people, especially about being Jewish and.
Okay, you were talking about your mother, and the last thing you said, I think, was that she was fearful. I think you were talking about that she was really afraid of things.
Uh, yes, I long thought that a large part of my life, up until more recent years, that the most salient quality of my own life was fear, this of the world and people and everything around it. And at some point, I realized that I got that, from my mother. My mother's life was much the same in that regard, and it was not only her own personal fear about things, but she was she had something of a little bit of I don't know, a little bit of a paranoia about the world in general and people in it, and that people would try to take advantage of her and well, that kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
in general. So she walked through life with a lot of fear. She was especially afraid, I think, of my father,
Mm-hmm.
and that translated into her behavior with, well, at least with me. I don't know about Lillian and Frida. And there were things I have felt that this is not blame. It's just a matter of recognizing certain patterns and that evolved in making me who I am, and preventing me from being something else. One of those things was that I may see maybe an alarm clock stop working, and I'd want to take it apart to see it. My mother would say, "Oh no, you have to wait till your father comes home." She was afraid that if I took it apart, I would break it. I wouldn't put it together again, and my father would come home and see that and be angry with her for allowing me to do that. Now I don't know that would have been the case. I don't know that my father would have done that, but she was afraid of that kind of thing. As a result, a lot of my own natural curiosity was repressed, or not repressed by me, but was stifled, and because I wasn't given the opportunity to express herself in that way. Consequently, did not become a mechanic.
But you became other things.
Well, that's true. I became a
Is there anything else you want to say about your mother before we move on to another personality? Any other final words about your mother?
There are some moments that I remember that stand out, and it was when I was a young man. One of them was when I was a young man and was moving out of the house, and my mother was very upset about that, to the extent that she said, "Where did I fail?" Meaning herself. Where did she fail? That I'm, as an adult now, moving out of the house, and it struck me as symptomatic of probably a lot that went on all during my growing up years that was holding on to me. I guess where I didn't have the opportunity to really expand and reach out and test my own abilities and inclinations as a result of her wanting to hold on. But I believe it's because her own life was so circumscribed by the dominance of my father, I believe. and yet she was so obviously such a strong and central part of the family life, and yet I think she felt, and it was apparent to everybody else, that my father dominated the family. It was really good to see her expand after my father died, and come out and started late in life enjoying a large part of the life that she didn't have earlier on. And she was, as I mentioned before, she was so well received in the world. You know, everyone spoke well of her.
Well, you were very devoted to her yourself, weren't you, in her final years?
I, I, I cared for her. I don't, I guess devoted would describe it as well, but I never thought of it that way. It wasn't a matter of, it almost seemed as though it wasn't a matter of choice. Of course it was, but there didn't seem to be any other thing to do. It was just inconceivable of doing anything else. You know, how in the world, the way I thought about it, how can I not take care of her? I never thought of it as something worthy of note, or to require any particular attention. Of course, you would do that. I would thought the question for me would be to the people who didn't take care of their parents. You know, what's wrong with them? You know, why is it not why are you taking care of your parent? So I never thought it was much. Although I was told that at times that it was bordered on obsessive, but I never thought of it that way.
Let's talk a bit about you now for posterity's sake. Can you give some biographical data about yourself for future generations? When you were born, your status in the family, what that was like growing up, the youngest of three children, also the profession you chose, your career, and without getting overly personal, if you're uncomfortable with that, just talk about yourself a bit. You're now the subject of this next few minutes.
Well, I was born in Philadelphia, and
What's your birthday?
March 21st, 1936. I don't. Was born in South Philadelphia. We lived there, as I mentioned before, for the first 4 years of my life. I don't remember any of that. Just a total blank. And when you talk about my place in a family, the role in a family, I don't know that I have ever thought much about it. It was. I remember some periods that were historical moments during that time. I was born in 1936. World War II started on 1941, so I was 5 years old when it started, and I remember that whole period. I remember very clearly things that went on during that period. You know, the blackouts, the black shades on the houses, and the air raid boxes on the blocks, and the air raid wardens, and so forth. The rationing. Gas, sugar, other commodity rationing. And of course, war ended in 1945, so I was at 6, 4 years, I was 10, 11 years old at the time it was ended, and I remember that. Now, that's a very historic period in the history of this country. And I remember when all that was taking place. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with family life, but I guess in a way it does, because there is those early summers we spent at the New Jersey shore. At least I remember 1 or 2 summers then. We would go down the shore rent a place for the summer. And the war ended during the summer, and I remember all the celebrations at that time.
How much older than you was Frida?
Frida's 3 years older.
And how much older than you was my mother?
Lillian is 12 years older. And Lillian wasn't really a part of the family life that I recall. She, as she told me later, she was very much a part of that. She, in fact, took care of Frida and me when my mother was working, my father was working, and so Lillian apparently spent a fair amount of time taking care of us, but I don't recall any of that.
Or about you? Go back to, so you grew up and what did
Yeah.
you went to university?
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember the childhood. Apparently,
Okay.
large blanks of childhood. Apparently, also, I was a very sickly child when I was very young. I was born with hernias, and I had some major surgery when I was very young, and wore a brace and all kinds of stuff. I had a birthmark that I was told covered the whole side of my face, and then it was treated and reduced. So, and I was a colicky baby. I mean, I was plagued with all kinds of chronic illnesses. As it turned out, I don't know why, maybe to compensate or what, and I don't remember any of that. I don't remember suffering at all. Oh, I had flat feet, and at that time that was considered a deformity, that, and attempts to correct it were special shoes with built-up arches. So although my foot was flat, I had to wear shoes that were pushing my foot up. As a result, every night I was in agony. After the shoes were taken off, it was yeah, my pain every single night. My mother would have to rub my legs every night. Finally, I imagine everybody wised up and put on regular shoes, and I was fine after that. And rather than being a limitation, I mean, it was no limitation whatever. I mean, as you know, flat feet don't mean anything. So, Lillian was not in the house except when she came back for a period of time when she was first divorced between marriages. Apparently, my sister and I, Frida and I, had a lot of conflict. I really don't remember it though. What I do remember was the good things, her support later, and she would take me along as a chaperone on her dates. I guess when she was going out on a date that she didn't particularly care for, she would take me. Frida, well, anyway, I played that role to some extent.
What role?
Well, just that of I don't know, protection. Not protection physically, but just being a third party along. I don't know how I got into the profession I did. It was not planned.
What profession was that?
I was a chemist, but it wasn't planned. I think as in school, I just tended towards the sciences. I recall later in college thinking that the liberal arts, the Bell Let, they were the most difficult courses. I mean, you had to interpret literature and understand history. I couldn't. That was beyond me. But math and physics and science, that was easy, and that was concrete. Of course, later I got a profound appreciation for literature and the more liberal arts subjects. And it was just kind of, I tended to take the kinds of courses I liked, and ended up a major in chemistry and into environmental science, and sort of just drifted. There was no plan to do that, which was a great mistake. One of the things if I would have had children, one of the reasons I would have had children was to be able to guide them to the best path for them to take.
So you were a chemist for how many years?
Oh, God, I guess a total about 35 years.
Would you work in a big company?
I worked, yes, probably the longest period of time I worked was for the city of Philadelphia in the water department, environmental chemistry.
Did you enjoy your work?
I did. It was, it spanned a very active and fertile part of the development of the water quality regulations and legislation in our country. And it spans that whole era from virtually nothing to the pretty stringent regulations that we have today. And there's also a period of time when the federal government, through the Environmental Protection Agency, was getting involved in upgrading the water quality throughout the country. Lots of federal funds were available for that. So $3 of every $3 out of every four for some major expansions and enterprises of municipal water systems came from the federal government. So there are all kinds of projects underway, research projects, and I was involved in that. It was an exciting time. I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed the part of operating, actually being involved in operating these huge facilities, utility facilities, water and wastewater treatment, and doing the research involved in developing new methods of treatment. And it was an exciting time. And things changed. It wasn't always smooth, but I enjoyed the work a lot. It was even getting into management was interesting because of a whole new set of challenges and demands, and getting work done through other people, and the liaisons with the outside agencies, dealing with all kinds of regulatory agencies and private industrial firms and the public, and I mean it was a wide variety of things, and you could almost create your own job at that time earlier on. So I got a great deal of experience, great deal of varied experience, and I did. I liked it a lot. I loved it. And then in later years, it became, at the very end, before I left, it just became a little bit too much of, although I enjoyed management, and I enjoyed the challenges involved in leadership and in motivation and getting people, it got to be that was the whole job. I was away from the science, I was away from the research, and I'm now dealing with personalities of people, and sometimes it was a hassle. It was just I had the other, why can't you, here's the job, why can't we just do it, instead of dealing with all the other the softer aspects of it. And after a while, at that point, I decided that it was time for a change.
And so what did you do?
Well, there was probably a breakdown in the planning process here, because I left that work before figuring out what it is I would follow it up with. So, and I guess I got to enjoy the the release from the pressure, and found that my life is filled up with other things without even trying that I take a great deal of pleasure in, and so I haven't really moved on to something else, but I am feeling the need to do that.
What have you filled your life with that brings you so much pleasure?
Well, I'm spending more time have spent more time with friends and family, and I've traveled a bit, visiting people and doing some of the things that I love to do but really didn't have time to do, and I'm involved in a relationship with the family that I spend a lot of time with. So I feel I'm enjoying a part of life that I really didn't take time for before.
Can you talk about the relationship that you have with our family since my mother died, and the efforts that you've made to be a part of the big events?
Well, it was no effort. It's marvelous. All it is enriching. I don't want this to sound corny against the family, but it has been probably one of the most wonderful developments of my life, in getting connected with the family, Lillian's family up here, and mainly with Lillian's family up here, I can't. It's hard for me to express how much that means to me to come up. And it was interesting to learn from Lori yesterday that um, even though I come up only for the usually the special occasions, special events where the family gets together, that Lori was saying, well, the rest of them don't get together much more often than that. Anyway, so apparently I'm up here seeing everybody as much as they're all seeing each other, and it means a great deal to me.
What was your relationship like with my mother before? Well, can you talk about, like, did your relationship with my mother start to change when after she was diagnosed with cancer?
No, it started to change when she had the Guillain-Barré, and when I heard about that, I forget, maybe it was you who told me, I don't know, but when I heard that she had Guillain-Barré, I didn't know what it was, but you told me what it was, and I came right up, and um, I don't know exactly the mental processes involved in that, but it was just something of a realization that I wanted to have closer connections somehow. I mean, I always loved everybody, enjoyed everybody up here, but I so seldom saw anybody. And I think one of the things that was going on was when my father died, Lillian, of course, came down, before he died, he was sick, came down. And we were talking, we were sitting in my living room talking about that she hadn't been down here to visit for 12 years. She hadn't been down to visit her parents, for 12 years. It took my father, you know, dying, or this is before he died, but he was just prior to that. It took my father getting ill like that and dying for her to come down. And this is, not, I'm not, all I'm mentioning this for is that was a reflection of what our own, Lillian's, Frida's, mine, my parents, what our family relationship was like. And I didn't want that. I didn't want that to continue for me to do that. So we come up and visit more often. And now has become, it's really become, even though we're not close, it has become really essential for me. I don't know how to say it. I'm having difficulty expressing this, but and joy isn't the word. I get a great deal of gratification about coming up and seeing everybody, getting to know not only my nieces, but my great nieces and nephews, and also the spouses, Jackie and Lori and Robert. It's been really special for me. It's in some way, perhaps I'm getting some of what I didn't create in my own immediate family, not only with my parents and siblings, but in my marriages, having children, and so forth. So I don't know all the emotional, psychological implications of it, but it's really important to me. And usually it would come up here for Passover. But this year Frida called and asked me if to come there, and I wanted to take that opportunity too, to do the same thing with Frida's family.
What was that like?
That was great. It was very special. They had Passover Seder at the it was at the country club. It was a community kind of Seder, and all Frida's kids were there with their children and spouses, and Margaret and her kids went also, and we had a wonderful time. It was really good. I'd love for Margaret and their kids to come up here with the Passover sometime. She has really the kids are really nice. So this has been a real good connection. I feel about the Goldbach family. I mean, I feel that this is my family. I don't have, the Goldbach family is my family just as much as as Frida's family is my family.
Um,
You're tired.
I know I want to finish this tape. Tell me about your relationship with my mother towards the end.
Oh, yeah, I didn't. We had. I don't remember that really very well, but I know that as in those last several years, from the time she had Guillain Barre and on, and beyond that, we had a few, at least few more conversations that we hadn't had before. Lillian, I didn't take advantage of it, but Lillian was really a resource that if, that I could have used and didn't to find out about my own family, great grandfather. In fact, you probably suggested that to me. I don't remember, but it's because she was a lot older than I, and she had memories of things that I didn't know existed. But we had other conversations about more intimate conversations. Not a lot. I mean, not a whole lot, but it was. I felt it was a closer relationship. I felt closer. I think she probably did also, and knew her at that time, more than I had in all the previous years, because we just
What did
never
you
spent time.
discover that you had in common?
Lillian was. I felt that she was thoughtful about the about relationships, of family relationships. Because mainly that's some things we talked about. There were other things, but mainly we're interested in family. So she was very thoughtful about that. She had insights, and she had a perspective that was different from mine, and new for me to hear. And she just had something to say about relationships, about the family, about the world that was valuable to me.
What perspective did she have that was different than yours?
She had well, she had the she saw. I guess she saw by the time I was aware of my family relationships. I guess things had evolved from something they were earlier, where I wasn't around or wasn't aware of. Lillian, kind of filled that in. Lillian saw things from a point of view that I couldn't have. Not only didn't have it, I couldn't have because I wasn't there. And not only wasn't I there physically, but even when I wasn't there when I was so young, I just wasn't aware of things. And so it mainly had to do with the mother. I know Lillian found it. I could understand it, but I didn't have the same reaction, or at least to that extent. Lillian was found it just I don't know what words she used. Impossible. It was impossible for her to be with my mother. For later years, she managed to endure for a few hours at a time, but she just it was so hard for her. I appreciated later. It was not. I mean, it was just. It wasn't willful that she didn't spend time. It wasn't that she'd come down to see my mother, and and Lily and I would go out and go do things because she could only take so much of my mother. But it was genuine. She just couldn't. She couldn't handle it. So I got to appreciate. It's easy to it's be easy for me in Philadelphia, taking care of my mother, to say, well, why isn't my sister down here? But having appreciating just what well, she wasn't there because she couldn't. She just wasn't capable of dealing with my mother. Things like that. And through a different, I thought of my father as the abusive one. Well, Lillian introduced another point of view in that my father was maybe was driven to he was driven to his extremes. So things like that I got a little different view on.
We've got less than a minute to go on this tape. Any final words? If you could pick a tree, what kind of a tree would you be? And that was a joke question. That was a Barbara Walters question. Any final words?
It'd be a beech.
Like a beached whale?
A beech tree.
Like the one in my front yard that you were admiring?
Yeah. I would, this was a nice opportunity for me too, and not because I was able to say anything revelatory, but just to think about the things, and which you don't usually do. I guess I'm not that introspective, but I think this will, start me maybe thinking about things a little bit more, about the family relationships and where you come from, where I come from, where I'm going. So thank you.
Hey, it was a pleasure, and you bring a lot of joy to our lives too. My kids just love you.
Well, yeah, I'm happy. I'm really happy about that, because I do too. I mean, I love them too, and they're just delightful.
And they feel that. I mean, it's not often kids really meet someone who really takes a delight in them, and they really feel that from you. And I think that's why they care so much about you, is because they really know that you care that much about them. That's rare for some to show it. You take a real interest. That's so rare.
No, I'm glad they feel that.
Yeah. And we feel that too.
By the way, I also wanted to say that